right? Right. Okay. Let's see if that's done it. Hello. Yes, there we go. Okay, let's try again. All right, sound now, I assume. Yes, you can all tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like it was just, yeah. For some, I don't know what happened. I don't know why it would reset where the sound was coming from, but for some reason it did. Anyway, not to worry. Um, it's always, it's always a challenge. What did I say coming in? Nothing really of significance so far. I just made a lot of silly tad noises. Said hello to everybody, told you what time it was, and then I was just about to start talking about Navigator's Children, which I've reached my last important landmark thing that I have to do before finishing, in the sense that I've got this kind of bit that has to be done. Well, there's one more bit after that, but that's like literally the last thing in the book. So I'm there. I'm another week or so, and I should be finished with my first draft, which, as I've mentioned a few times, is not necessarily anything I would want to show somebody, but it basically is the complete thing with the need for some corrections and changes. And it's long. It's long. It's very long. I don't know how I possibly thought that I was going to stuff this much plot into a single volume, and I'm very glad we broke it into 2 volumes, despite the embarrassment that this always causes me every time I realize I've miscalculated and have to turn a trilogy into a tetralogy. But I'm used to it by now. I have a thick skin on my own stupidity, which is a good thing to develop. And if you haven't developed it by the time you're as old as I am, then you're probably in trouble, because you're going to do a lot of stupid things in life. We all do. That's the nature of things. Anyway, what else is there? Our oldest child is off having a job interview this evening, which is a shocking and exciting development. So we're wishing him the very best of luck on that. If I'm sometimes somewhat vague about how many kids we've got and all that, and and their various genders and names and all that, I try not to use their names. That's been true ever since the biological ones were young, just because first of all, I don't particularly want to advertise too much about them, because they have their own life, and that includes an online life, and I don't want people telling them, hey, I saw where your dad said blah blah, that wouldn't have been something I would have liked as a kid, even though we were still communicating by Pony Express at that point in history. But and then there's also the fact that some of our kids, not all of our kids, but some of our kids are changing in various ways, and one of them is gender fluid, and so I also tend to not want to confuse things when things are confusing anyway sometimes in terms of what their identities are. But basically, we've got 4 of them. We've got 2 biological kids and 2 young people that we took in, who were both known to the family, and we love them very much too. And we still have 2 of them at home, one of each, one biological and one happenstance. And we're slowly moving them out, slowly pushing them out the door, and urging them, time to leave the nest, spread your wings. So one of them is out tonight having well, it sounds like it's actually more of a hiring than a job interview, which is even better, because it's always good to have a way to make money. So that's basically what's going on. Working on the book. Deb is back from over the hill, and so the dogs are both much relieved that we're back to more or less a quorum of responsible adults in the household, so that they will get fed and medicated and things like that. And what else? That's really about it at the moment, just the usual stuff. So, since I'm going to actually be reading tonight before too long, I think I'm going to check in and say hello to the people who have checked in and said hello. So let us do that. So first up on the top of the list is Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer. Good evening to you. Tracy, hello, and good evening to you too. Medardo, Medardo, un placer, señor. Un placer verte. And Medardo is having a good Sunday, it sounds like, and very good news in Brazil, too. Yes, I do try to keep this from being too political because, as I've said before, I want people to be able to come here and just put off everything else. And if they want to listen to the stories, listen to the stories. But I can say that, yes, thank God. Because Brazil is a super important country in many, many ways, one of the biggest and most populous in the world, but also the custodians of a huge amount of the Earth's natural resources in the Amazon jungle. So having a decent human being running the government there is important to all of us. So yes, good news in Brazil. Let us hope that that continues and that things get better there. And not just because of the politics of it, but just because it's a country full of human beings, and they've had a very rough time the last 4 years. So good wishes for Brazil. Who else has checked in? Barb Ann, hello, good evening. Hoping everyone is well on your end too. Emily, good to see you. Melissa, hello, hello. Hoping everybody is well tonight also. Christy, hello. Okay, now everybody is commenting on the lack of sound. There's Kristen. Hi, Kristen. Soren. Well, Soren says, that's how Jaloy's name is pronounced? Mein Gott. I've been saying it Geloe. Then again, I always pronounce the or Jaloe, or Jaloe, the last E in Miriamel. Either way, happy Halloween. Soren, as I have said many, many times, but I will say again very quickly, I don't give a tinker's damn how anybody pronounces the names. And this is the most important thing, many of the names, you mentioned Miriamel, many of the names I pronounced wrong myself because I came up with the names and started using them in my head before I had formalized the rules of the various places and the languages of those places. So Miriamel is an example. Because her name, as stated in the book, is Nabani, because her mother was Nabani, she should be pronounced Miriamele or Miriamela or something like that. In other words, the E at the end should be pronounced. So technically, you were doing it right. I'm doing it wrong. But, you grandfather this stuff in. And I started calling these characters what I started calling them before the rules were established. As for Jaloy, I think it actually says in the Dragonbone chair on the back that it could be either Jaloy or Jaloy. Jaloy or Jaloy or Jaloy. So, you can look. It's in the index if you've got the book there somewhere. But again, that's just how I pronounce it. And as you're going to find out in the Navigator's Children, that's not even her given name. It's one of her later names. So there's a little thing for you to look for when the books come out. You will learn what Jaloy's real name is. Not that it's anything unusual. I mean, it's not Herkimer or Joanne Jacob Jingleheimer Smith or anything like that. But it's not her birth name. Anyway, so that's how I pronounce Jaloy. I don't care how anybody else pronounces it. It's okay with me. Now we're working our way through all the people who couldn't hear. Jeremy couldn't hear the sound because it wasn't on, because somehow this particular software turned off that thing in between last night and tonight. Don't ask me how. Timothy also comments that his sound isn't working. Okay. Susan. Hello, Susan. Thank you for checking in. Becky. Hi. Good to see you. Let's see who else. Christy, I think I already said hello to, but just in case I didn't, hello again. Chris, happy Halloween. Yes, happy Halloween, even though it's technically not Halloween until I have candy that I can steal from young people. And I don't know if any of the young people in the household are going to be bringing home candy this year, so I may be out of luck. That's a horrifying thought. No dad tax. Oh my God. I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah, the only ones that still went trick-or-treating have now moved out. Oh my God, I won't have any candy. I'm going to have to go trick-or-treating myself. Timothy, if I haven't said hello to you already, although I think I have. Okay, these are all the folks who haven't heard the sound, but I think most of them checked in. Tracy, hello, hello. Claudia, hello, Claudia. Good to see you. Chris, hello, Chris. A pleasure as always, and thank you for your work putting up the readings. Let me see. Penny, Penny's here. Penny can hear. Kelly, hello and good evening. Jared, good to see you too. Angie, good evening, good evening. Isaac, hello from Isaac and Aaron. Ah, good. Both of you checking in. Lovely. Ron, there's Ron. Hello, Ron. Tim, good to see you, Tim. And happy Halloween to you. Carl, good evening to you. Vimor Kasperik, assuming that you pronounce the C that way. There could be other ways. It could be Kachperik or any number of other things. Checking in from Dearborn, Michigan. So hello and welcome. Good to have you. Jonathan, finished Into the Narrow Dark. Oh, well, thank you, Jonathan. He liked it. A pleasure to hear. And let me see. Shannon, hello. Sound is lovely here. Great to see you. Well, good to see you too, Shannon. I'm glad we fixed the sound. It wasn't lovely to begin with. It was off. Ray, greetings, greetings. And Alan. Hello, Alan. That's Alan David Clark there, popping in at the end. So I think I've said hello to everybody who's checked in. And with that, I might as well start reading. Let me think. Is there anything else I wanted to mention? Anything of interest? No, I don't have anything. I mean, it's like if I were, if I had merchandise or stuff like that to sell, but I don't. I probably should. I'm just terrible at all of this marketing, self-branding stuff, I mean, but that's all right. That's okay. That's my claim to fame, is how crap I am at marketing myself. It's a pretty dubious claim. It's not really anyone that I would normally recommend as a resume builder, but there you go. That's it. It's kind of, I would assume, fairly well known that I stopped when we had kids. I stopped going to conventions, so I lost a lot of my kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, my exposure there. And for various reasons, there's a lot of stuff I don't do. I'm not on Twitter as much as I should be, which is where a lot of the discussion goes on and where you get infamous or for your opinions or whatever. As I've gotten older, I just spend more and more time trying to work on my books and take care of my family. And that's boring, I know. And I'd be bored too by that if I were, a fan of my work. That I'm not doing more exciting things and out there, making lots of noise in the public arena. But, what can I do? It's also, it's a lot of work to write really long books, and that's kind of where I'm putting my energy into. And have been doing for quite some time. As my energy has diminished, as I have matured, as I have been antiqued by life and mortality, more and more of my energy has been diverted into just trying to get the work done. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, because I love writing and I love telling stories. And the other thing is because that's how I make a living. And that's how my whole family, and my immediate family makes its living. So when the choice is, well, go on tour or finish a book, or, go, not that I don't, go overseas and stuff like that sometimes, but in terms of, really beating the bushes and getting out there all the time and marketing myself, I'm not very good at it. But again, that's part of it is, just the need to work. And I don't know, I'm babbling again. But I guess it wouldn't be a Sunday if Tad wasn't blathering about things, because that's kind of what I do. I blather. Been thinking about this a lot because of losing my mom this summer. And my mom and I, both of us, are the kind of people who will just start talking about things. To people we don't know, I'm sort of probably slightly infamous back in England. I used to just talk to strangers all the time, which is, it's even weird in California, but in England, it's downright terrifying. So that was definitely something I got from my mom. My mom loved to converse, she loved to hear what other people thought about things, and she had a lot she wanted to share, and that very definitely is a part of my character that came from her, or my genetics, who knows. Anyway, we're talkers. Speaking of, I have talked enough, and I am now going to start reading. So where we were, as I was reading last night, was essentially Simon and the rest had come back from this Dream Road vision, as it were, and Jaloi had agreed with Simon. There, my eyeballs are crooked again. Jaloi had agreed with Simon and Benebek that this was something very real. This was not just a dream vision, that the appearance of the mountain and the queen with the silver mask and all was very significant, and that she had had concerns about some of this stuff, and that all of these things happening, Cook dying, Benebek's teacher, mentor, Morganes, what happened with Jazua, what Simon experienced on Thistleborg, that all these things had significance. Then she came in the very early morning and told them there are these people who are chasing you are now next to the lake. So they have had to sneak out across the lake and slip past the Erkenlandish soldiers and to continue on their way to Naglamund. And they've been instructed by Jaloi to look for Dai Chikiza, the deserted Scythi city, and then make their way up over the hills into Naglamund. So that's where we is, and that's where I'm going to start reading. For a long time, they paddled hard against the river's flow. Even had they not felt the need for silence, they would have been hard-pressed to make any conversation. The paddling was such strenuous work. At last, close to an hour later, they found a small backwater, hedged in by a secretive screen of reeds where they could stop and rest. The sun was now well up, a glowing blur behind a pearly sky-wide canopy of clouds. A film of mist still clung to the forest and river, so that their surroundings seemed the landscape of a dream. Somewhere up ahead, the stream was passing through or over some obstacle. The quiet purr of moving water was augmented by the chime-like tones of the watercourse leaping and splashing back upon itself. Simon, panting, watched the girl Maria as she leaned on the gunwale, her cheek resting on her forearm. It was hard to understand how he had ever mistaken her for a boy. What he had seen as fox-like, as a sharpness of feature unusual in a boy, he now saw as delicacy. She was flushed with exertion. Simon stared at her ruddy cheek, and his eye moved down the white length of her extended neck to the gentle but well-defined protrusion of her collarbone, where the boy's shirt she wore gaped open at the throat. She's not well padded, not like Hepzibah, he mused. I like to see Hepzibah pass as a boy. Still, she's pretty in a kind of thin way. Her hair is so very black. Maria's eyes fluttered closed. She continued to breathe deeply. Simon absently stroked Kantaka's wide head. Well made, is she not? Benebek asked cheerfully. Simon gaped at him, startled. What? Benebek frowned. I am sorry. Perhaps you are calling them him in Erkenland? It? Possibly. Still, you must agree that Jaloi has done a job of great craft. Benebek, Simon said, his blush beginning to fade, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. The little man pounded the gunwale softly with the flat of his hand. What a nice work Jaloi has accomplished with bark and wood, and so light. We shall not have much trouble, I am thinking, to carry this overland to the Elfwent. The boat, Simon said, nodding like a village idiot. The boat! Yes, it is well made. Maria sat up. Are we going to try and cross to the other river now? She asked. As she turned again to look out across the thin strip of forest visible through the reeds, Simon noticed the dark circles under her eyes, her strained look. In a way, he was still upset with her for being relieved when Jaloi volunteered to keep the child, but he was glad to see that this servant girl seemed concerned, that she wasn't just the kind of girl who laughed and teased all the time. Well, of course she's not, he thought a moment later. As a matter of fact, I don't think I've seen her smile yet. Not that things haven't been frightening, but you don't see me always frowning and moping. That might perhaps be a good idea, Benedict said, responding to Maria's question. I believe that the noise which is sounding ahead is a gathering of rocks in the stream. If that is being the case, we would anyway have little choice but to carry the boat around. Perhaps Simon would go find out. How many years old are you? Simon asked Maria. Benedict, surprised, turned around and stared. Maria quirked her lips and looked at Simon for a long moment. I am, she began, then paused. I will have 16 years, in Octander. 15, then, Simon said, a little smugly. And you? The girl challenged. Simon bristled. 15? Benedict coughed. Well, good that shipmates should have acquaintance of each other, but perhaps later? Simon, could you go to see if there are indeed rocks ahead? He was about to agree, then suddenly he did not want to. Was he an errand boy? A child to run and find out things for the grown-ups? Who had made the decision to go and rescue this stupid girl from a tree anyway? As long as we need to cross to the whatever it's called, why bother? He said. Let's just do it. The troll stared, then at length nodded his head. Very well. I think it will do my friend Kantaka good to be stretching her legs. Besides, he turned to Maria, wolves are not sailors, you know. Now, for a few moments, Maria stared at Benedict as if he were odder than Simon. Then she burst into ringing laughter. That's very true, she said, and laughed again. The canoe was indeed feathery light, but they still had difficulty carrying it through the clinging branches and creepers. To keep it at a height where both Benedict and the girl could help bear the load, they had to hold the upside-down boat in such a way that the sharp angle of the stern kept thumping against Simon's breastbone. He couldn't see his feet as he walked either, with the result that time and again he was tripped up in the undergrowth. Rain showered down through the overhanging net of boughs and leaves. With his hands occupied, Simon could not even wipe away the drops that ran into his eyes. He was not in the best of all possible moods. How far is it, Benedict? He asked at last. My chest is being battered to pieces by this Bayou Siri's damnable boat. Not far, I am hoping, the troll called, his voice echoing strangely from beneath the stretched bark shell. Jaloi said that the inlet stream and the Elfwent run side by side for a long distance, being only a quarter of a league or so apart. Soon we should reach it. Soon it had better be, Simon said grimly. In front of him, Maria made a noise that he was sure was a sound of disgust. Disgust with him, probably. He scowled, horribly, red hair stringy and wet on his forehead. At last they heard another sound above the soft drumming of raindrops on leaves, a breathy rush that made Simon think of a room full of murmuring people. Kantaka leaped ahead, clattering through the underbrush. Ah! Benedict grunted, laying his end of the boat down. You see, we have found it. We have found it. Tsuyase. I thought it was named Elfwent. Maria rubbed the place where the boat had rested on her shoulder. Or is that what trolls always say when they find a river? Benedict smiled. No, that is a Scythy name. It is a Scythy river, in a way, since they used to be boating upon it when Dai Chikiza was their city. You should be knowing that. Elfwent means Scythy river in the old tongue of Erkenland. Then what does what you said mean? Maria asked. Tsuyase? Benedict thought. Hard it is to say exactly. It means something like her blood is cool. Her? Simon asked, digging mud from his boots with a stick. What's her this time? The forest, Benedict replied. Come now, you can be washing that mud off in the water. They carried the boat down the bank, pushing it through a thicket of cattails, only with a great deal of stem snapping, until the river was before them, a wide, healthy expanse of water, far bigger than the inlet stream, and with what looked like a far stronger current. They had to lower the boat down into the gully carved by the river's passage. Simon, the tallest, wound up standing knee-deep in the shallows to receive the boat. His boots were indeed washed clean. He held the bobbing craft as Maria and the troll first levered a doubtful kantaka over the edge, without much help from the wolf herself, then followed after. Simon climbed in last, taking his place in the stern. Your positioning, Simon, Benedict told him gravely, requires great responsibility. We shall find little need to paddle with a current of such vigor, but you must steer, and you must call out when there are rocks ahead so we can all help push away from them. I can do it, he said quickly. Benedict nodded and let go of the long branch he had been clutching. They eased off from the bank and out into the surging Elfwint. It was a little difficult at first, Simon found. Some of the rocks that they needed to avoid were not even visible above the water's glassy surface. Rather, they lay just below, only recognizable by the shiny humps made by the water above them. The first one Simon did not see made a horrible noise, scraping along the taut hull, giving them all a moment's scare. But the little boat bounded away from the submerged stone like a sheep fleeing the shears. Soon Simon had the feel of it. In spots, the craft seemed almost to skim the top of the water, weightless as a leaf on the river's undulating back. As they hit a stretch of smoother water, the clamor of the rocks falling away behind them, Simon felt his heart swell within his chest. The playful hands of the river tugged his trailing paddle. A memory of climbing on the Hayholt's broad battlements came to him, breathless with his own power, with the sight of the ordered fields lying so far below. He remembered, too, crouching in the bell chamber of Green Angel Tower, looking down on the huddling houses of Urchester, staring out over the broad world with the wind in his face. Now, in the stern of the little boat, he was again both of the world and above it, far above it, sailing like the spring wind gusting through the treetops. He lifted the paddle in the air before him. It was now a sword. Eucyrus was a sailor, he abruptly sang, the words coming back to him in a rush. It was a tune someone had sung to him when he was very young. Eucyrus was a sailor. He went upon the ocean. He took the word of God, and he went sailing to Naban-o. Benedict and Maria turned to look at him. Simon grinned. Tiagoras was a soldier. He went upon the ocean. He took the word of justice and went sailing to Naban-o. King John, he was a ruler. He went upon the ocean. He took the word of Adon and went sailing to Naban-o. He trailed off. Why do you stop? Benedict asked. Maria still stared, a speculative look in her eye. That's all I know, Simon said, lowering his paddle back into the boat's rippling wake. I don't even know where it's from. I think one of the chambermaids used to sing it when I was small. Benedict smiled. A good song for river travel, I am thinking, although some of the details have not much historical correctness. Are you sure you can remember no more? That's it. His failure to recall troubled him little. Just a short hour on the river had redeemed his mood entirely. He had been on a fisherman's boat in the bay and had enjoyed it, but that was nothing to this, to the forest rushing by and the feeling of the delicate boat beneath him, as sensitive and responsive as a colt. I have no sailing songs to sing, the troll said, pleased by Simon's change of mood. In High Cannock, the rivers are ice, and used only for the sliding games of trollings. I could be singing, perhaps, of mighty Chucku and his adventures. I know a river song, said Marya, running a slender white hand through her thatch of black hair. The streets of Merriman are full of sailor songs. Merriman? Simon asked. How did a castle girl ever get to Merriman? Marya curled her lip at him. And where do you think the princess and all her court lived before we came to the hay-hole? The wilds of Niskadu? She snorted. Merriman, of course. It is the most beautiful city in the world, where the ocean and the great river Glenawent meet. You wouldn't know. You haven't been there. She grinned wickedly. Castle boy. Then sing, Benedict said, waving his hand before him. The river waits to hear. The forest, too. I hope I remember, she said, sneaking a glance at Simon, who haughtily returned it. Her remark had barely touched the buoyancy of his mood. It's a river rider song, she continued, then cleared her throat and began, tentatively at first, then more confidently, to sing in a sweet, throaty voice. By the way, this song has which I only wrote the words for, Sebastian Barwinick has written some really nice music for and performs it beautifully. So if you would like to hear it actually sung and with a proper tune and everything, I believe Sebastian's last name is spelled Barwinek, but you could also probably just look up Merriman or something like that and find it on YouTube. So just a bit of a commercial for somebody who's done some really nice stuff and written some very nice melodies to some of the things I've put in my books. It's a river rider song, she continued, then cleared her throat and began, tentatively at first, then more confidently, to sing in a sweet, throaty voice. Now those who sail the big pond will tell you of its mystery. They'll brag of all those battles and all that bloody history. But talk to any river dog who sails upon the Glenawent. He'll say God made the oceans, but the river's what he really meant. Oh, the ocean is a question, but the river is an answer, with her rollicking and frolicking as fine as any dancer. So let hell take the shirkers, for this old boat won't carry 'em, and if we lose some crew or two, we'll drink to 'em at Merriman. Now some men go away to sea, and they're never seen again, but every night we river dogs are found down at the inn. And some may say we drink a bit and punch it up a mite, but if the river is your lady, that's just how you rest at night. Oh, the ocean is a question, but the river is an answer, with her rollicking and frolicking as fine as any dancer. So let hell take the shirkers, for this old boat won't carry 'em, and if we lose some crew or two, we'll drink to 'em at Merriman. In Merriman, we'll drink to 'em in Merriman. If we don't say spy 'em floatin' by, it'll save the penny to bury 'em. By the time Marya had gotten to the chorus the second time around, Simon and Benedict knew the words well enough to join in. Kantaka flattened her ears as they hooted and shouted down the swift racing Aelfwent. Oh, the ocean is a question, but the river is an answer, Simon was singing at the top of his lungs when the nose of the boat dipped down into a trough and bounced up. They were among the rocks again. By the time they had negotiated the roiling waters and were out into the clear, they were all too breathless for singing. Simon, however, was still grinning, and as the gray clouds above the forest roof opened, showering down more rain, he tilted his chin up and caught the drops on his tongue. Raining now, Benedict said, eyebrows arched beneath the hair plastered to his forehead. I am thinking we shall get wet. The brief instant of silence was pierced by the troll's high-pitched, gusting laugh. When the light filtering down through the canopy of trees began to dim, they steered the boat to the side and made camp. After building a fire, using his sack of yellow dust to kindle the damp wood, Benedict produced a parcel of fresh vegetables and fruits from one of the packs Jaloi had provided. Kantaka, left to her own devices, went slinking off into the tall brush, returning sometime later with her fur soaking wet and a few streaks of blood adorning her muzzle. Simon looked at Maria, who was meditatively sucking on a peach pit, to see what her reaction would be to this evidence of the brutal side of the wolf's nature. But if the girl noticed, she showed no signs of unease. She must have worked in the princess's kitchens, he guessed. Still, if I had one of Morgana's stuffed lizards to slip in her cloak, then she'd jump, I'll wager. Thinking about her working in castle kitchens set him to wondering just what it was she had done in the princess's service. And now that he thought of it, what had she been doing spying on him? But when he tried to ask her questions about the princess, she only shook her head, saying that she could not say anything about her mistress or her services until the message had been delivered at Naglemund. I am hoping you will forgive my asking, Benedict said as he packed away the few supper things and took his walking stick apart, producing at last his flute. But what is your plan if Josua is not at Naglemund for receiving your message? Maria looked disturbed by this, but still would not say anything more. Simon was tempted to ask Benedict about their plans, about Diachikiza and the style, but the troll was already tootling absently on his flute. Night pulled a blanket of darkness over all the great Aldhort but their tiny fire. Simon and Maria sat listening as the troll set his music to swooping and echoing in the rainy treetops. They were on the river soon after sunup the next day. The rhythms of the moving water now seemed as familiar as a child's rhyme. The long idle stretches in which it seemed that their boat was a rock upon which they sat while the vast sea of trees marched by on either side, then the dangerous excitement of the fast-running rapids that shook the frail craft as though it were a hooked and wriggling fish. The rain let up in mid-morning, and in its place the sun sprinkled down through the overhanging branches, dotting the river and forest floor with puddles of light. The welcome respite from the weather, unusually wintry for late Maya, Simon couldn't help noticing, remembering the icy mountains of their shared dream, kept their spirits high. As they floated along through the tunnel of leaning trees, broken here and there by majestic sheets of sunlight that streamed down through gaps in the tangled branches to turn the river briefly into a mirror of polished golden glass, they entertained each other with talk. Simon, reluctantly at first, told of the people he had known at the castle. Rachel, Tobus the dog-keeper, who daubed his nose black with lamp grease to more easily pass as family among his charges, Peter Gildedbowl, Giant Reuben, and the rest. Benedict spoke more of his journeying, of his youthful travels to the brackish Ran country and the dismal exotic wastelands east of his Mintahawk home. Even Maria, despite her initial reticence and the large area of unapproachable topics, made Simon and the troll smile with her imitations of river sailor and ocean mariner arguments, and her observations about some of the dubious nobility that surrounded the Princess Miriamel at Merrimund and the Hayhold. Only once did the conversation of the second day's boating turn to the darker subjects that shadowed all the companions' thoughts. Benedict, Simon asked as they took their midday meal in a sunlit patch of forest meadow, do you really think we've left those men behind? Might there be others looking for us, too? The troll flicked an apple pip from his chin. I do not know anything with sureness, friend Simon, as I have already been saying. Sure I am that we slipped by, that there was no immediate pursuit. But since I cannot be knowing why exactly they seek us, I cannot know whether they can find us. Do they know we are bound for Naglemund? That is not a difficult thing to be supposing. But 3 things there are in our favor. What things? Maria asked, a slight frown on her face. First, it is easier to hide than find in a forest. He held up a stubby finger. Second, we are taking a back route to Naglemund that is not well known for hundreds of years. Another finger.
last to find out our route. Those men will have to hear it from Jaloi. His third finger straightened. And that is a thing that will not, I think, happen.
Simon had been secretly worrying about just this. Won't they hurt her? Those were men with swords and spears, Benedict. Owls won't scare them off forever if they think we're with her. A grave nod. The troll tented his short fingers. I am not being unconcerned, Simon. Daughter of the mountains, I am not. But you know little of Jaloi. To think of her only as a village wise woman is to be making a mistake. A mistake Hayforth's men may regret if they do not treat her with respect. A long time Valada Jaloi has walked Ostenard. She has been many years in the forest. Sorry, I'm trying to unplug this thing. She has been many years in the forest. Sorry, I've lost my place here. A long time Valada Jaloi has walked Ostenard. She has been many years in the forest, and many, many years before that among the Rimmersgarders. Even preceding that, she was coming up from the south into Naban, and her travels before no one knows. She is one who can be trusted for taking care of herself. Far more than I, or even as was proved with such sadness, that good man, Morgenis. He reached for another apple, the last in the bag. But that is enough of such worrying. The river is waiting, and our hearts must be light, so we can faster travel. Later in the afternoon, as the shadows of the trees began to blend together into one large blotch of shade stretched across the river, Simon learned more of the mysteries of the Aelfwent. He was digging through his pack, searching for a bit of rag to wrap around his hands to protect them from the blisters raised by the coarse paddle. He found something that felt like what he was searching for and pulled it out. It was the white arrow, still bound in the tattered hem of his shirt. It was surprising to suddenly have it in his hand again, to feel its delicacy laying in his palm like a feather that might be swept away in the first errant breeze. He carefully unwrapped the shielding cloth. "Look here," he said to Maria, reaching past Kantaka to show it nestled on its blanket of rag. "It's a Scythy white arrow. I saved the life of a Scythaman, and he gave it to me." He reconsidered briefly. "Shot it at me, actually." It was a beautiful thing. In the dimming light, it was almost luminous, like the shimmering breast of a swan. Maria looked at it for a moment, then touched it with a raised finger. It's pretty, she said, but in her tone there was none of the admiration Simon had hoped to hear. Of course it's pretty. It's sacred. It means a debt owed. Ask Benedict, he'll tell you. Simon is correct, the troll called back from the prow. That was happening just before we met. Maria continued to regard the arrow calmly, as though her mind flew elsewhere. It's a lovely thing, she said, only slightly more conviction in her voice than the time before. You're very lucky, Simon. He didn't know why, but that made him furious. Didn't she realize what he had been through? Lich yards? Trapped Scythy, the hounds? The enmity of a high king? Who was she to answer like one of the chambermaids, absent-mindedly soothing him when he had skinned a knee? Of course, he said, holding the arrow up before him, so it caught a beam of near horizontal sunlight, the riverbank a moving tapestry behind it. Of course, for all the luck it's brought me so far. Attacked, bitten, hungry, chased. I might as well have never got it. He stared at it crossly, running his eyes over the carvings that might have been the story of his life since he had left the Hayhold. Complicated, but meaningless. I really might as well throw it away, she said casually. He never would, of course, but it's strangely satisfying to pretend that he might. I mean to say, what good has it brought me? Benedict's warning cry came in mid-sentence, but by the time Simon could sort things out, it was too late. The boat struck the hidden rock almost directly.
The craft lurched, the stern reaching the water with a sucking splash. The arrow flew from Simon's hand and was spinning through the air into the water, churning around the rocks. As the boat's rear smacked down, Simon turned to look for it. A moment later, they skidded off another submerged stone, and he was falling. The boat tipping, falling. The water was shockingly cold. For an instant, it was though he had fallen through some hole in the world into absolute night. Then he was gasping, breaking the surface, whirling crazily in the turbulent water. He struck a rock, spun away, and went under again. Terrifying water, pushing the air from his nose and mouth. Struggling, he got his head to the top again, intent to swirl as the swirling current battered against one hard object after another. He felt wind on his face for a moment and sucked in, coughing. He felt some of the crazy air making its way into his burning lungs. Then suddenly the rocks were past. He was floating free, kicking to keep his head above the plane of the river. To his surprise, the boat was behind him, sliding around the last of the humpbacked stones. Benedick and Mario paddling hard, eyes round with fear, but Simon saw the distance gradually growing wider. He was slipping downstream, and as he pitted his head wildly to either side, he saw the riverbanks were shockingly far away. He gasped in another great cloud of air. Simon! Benedick yelled. Swim back to us. We cannot row fast enough. Floundering, tried to struggle back. The river pulled him with 1,000 invisible fingers. He splashed, trying to form his hands into the paddle shapes. Rachel, Morganis had once shown him as they held him suspended in the shallows of the Kinsley. The effort seemed laughable against the all-pervading power of the current. He was tiring fast. He could not find his legs, and he felt nothing but a cold emptiness when he tried to make them kick. The water splashed up into prism tree reaching trees slipped back under the surface. Something smacked down beside his hand, and he beat his arms against the cold water to climb back one last time. It was Maria's paddle. With her longer reach, she had pushed it up Benedick's place in the prow and stretched out, extending the flat piece of inches of his grasp. Kandaka was standing beside her, straining almost in mimicry of the girl. The canoe with so much weight forward dangerously. Simon sent a thought to where his legs had been, told them to kick if they could hear him, threw out his hand. He barely felt he curled his numb fingers about it. But it was there, just where he needed it to be. After they had hauled over the side, a nearly impossible task, since he weighed more than any of them except the wolf. And after he had coughed out enough great quantities of river water, he lay, panting, shivering, curled in a ball at the bottom of the girl in the troll search for a spot to make landing. He recovered enough strength to crawl out himself by shaking legs. As he fell on his knees, spreading great palms on the soft forest floor, Benedick reached down and plucked something loose from the sodden mess of Simon's shirt. See, what was the cause up in your clothes? Benedick said, an odd look on his face. It was the white arrow. Let us fire for you, Simon. Perhaps you had a lesson, a cruel lesson, but a serious one, about speaking ill of Scythian gifts while sailing on a Scythian river. Denied even the strength to be embarrassed, as Benedick helped him shed his clothes and wrapped him in his cloak. Simon fell asleep, blessed fire. His dreams, unsurprising, full of things that clutched, smothered. Clouds hover following morning. Simon, very sick. After chewing and swallowing a couple of strips of dried meat against the protestations of his queasy stomach, he clambered gingerly, letting Maria take the stern this time while he huddled
Kantaka's warm bulk pressed against him. He slept on and off throughout the long day on the river. The sliding green blur that was the forest made him dizzy, and his head felt hot, much too large, like a potato swelling on the coals. Both Benedict and Maria checked the progress of his fever solicitously. When he woke from the sludgy doze he had fallen into, while his two companions ate lunch, and found them bending over him, Maria's cool palm on his forehead, his confused thought was, what a strange mother and father I have. They halted for the night just as twilight began creeping through the trees. Simon, swaddled in his cloak like an infant, sat close to the fire, unwrapping his arms only long enough to drink some soup the troll had prepared. A broth. Excuse me. Simon, swaddled in his cloak like an infant, sat close to the fire, unwrapping his arms only long enough to drink some soup the troll had prepared. A broth of dried beef, turnips, and onions. We must be getting up with the first footsteps of the sun tomorrow, Benedict said, proffering the stem end of the turnip to the wolf, who sniffed it with benign indifference. Close we are to Chiquiza, but it would be senseless to come upon it at night when it could not be properly seen. In any way, we will have a long climb up the stile from there, and may as well undertake it when the day is warm. Simon watched clearly as the troll pulled Morgenes' manuscript from one of the packs and unwrapped it, squatting close to the flickering campfire and tilting the pages to read it. He looked like a little monk in prayer over his book of Avon. The wind rustled through the trees overhead, knocking loose water drops that had clung to the leaves, remnants of the afternoon shower. Mixed in with the dull rush of the waters below was the insistent piping of the tiny river frogs. It took Simon a while to realize that the soft pressure against his shoulder was not just another strange message from his sick, discomforted body. He laboriously turned his chin past the collar of his heavy wool cloak, freeing a hand to shoo Kantaka off, only to see Maria's dark head resting on his upper arm, mouth slightly open, breath easing in and out with the rhythms of sleep. Benedict looked over. It was a hard day of working today, he smiled. Much paddling. If it is not paining you, let her stay there a bit. He turned back to the manuscript. Maria stirred against him and murmured something. Simon tugged the cloak that Jaloi had loaned her, up higher. As it touched her cheek, she half muttered something, reached up a hand and patted clumsily at Simon's chest, then squirmed a little nearer. The sound of her even breathing so close to his ear threaded its way in among the noises of river and night forest. Simon shivered and felt his eyes becoming heavy. So heavy. But his heart was beating swiftly, and it was the sound of his restless blood that led him down a path toward warm darkness. In the gray, diffuse light of a rainy dawn, with eyes still sticky with sleep and bodies queerly unresponsive from their too early start, they saw the first bridge. Simon was in the stern again. Despite the disorientation of boarding the boat and joining the river in near darkness, he felt better than he had the day before, still lightheaded but much more fit. As they rounded a bend in the river, which leaped along happily, careless of the hour, he saw a strange shape arched across the water ahead. Wiping his eyes free for a moment of the misty drizzle that seemed not so much to fall as to hang in the air, he squinted. "Benedict?" he asked, leaning forward. "Is that a bridge?" "It is, yes," the troll replied cheerily. "The Gate of Cranes, I think it must be." The river bore them ever closer, and they shipped water with their paddles to slow down. The bridge stretched up from the choking undergrowth of the riverbank to extend in a slender arc into the trees on the other side. Carved in a pale, translucent green stone, it seemed delicate as a span of frozen sea foam. Once, covered with intricate carvings, now much of its surface was obscured by moss and twining ivy. The spots that showed through had been worn down, the whorls and curves and hard angles softened, rounded by wind and rain. Perched at its apex, directly over their heads as the little boat slid underneath, a cream-green, translucent stone bird spread its water-worn wings. They passed through the faint shadow in moments and were out the other side. The forest suddenly seemed to breathe antiquity, as though they had slid through an open door into the past. "Long ago have the river roads been swallowed up by Old Heart," Benedict said quietly as they all turned to watch the bridge dwindling behind them. "Perhaps even the other works of the Scythe will be fading someday." "How could people cross over a river on such a thing?" Maria wondered. "It looks so fragile." "More fragile than it was once, that is certain," Benedict said with a wistful backward glance. "But the Scythe never build for beauty alone. Their works have strength. Does not the tallest tower in Ostenard, the work of their hands, still stand in your hayhold?" Maria nodded, thinking. Simon trailed his fingers in the cold water. I'm going to run a few minutes over because we're almost at the end of the chapter. So they passed 11 more bridges, or gates, as Benedict called them, since they had for 1,000 years or more marked the river entrance to Dai Chiquiza. Each gate was named for an animal, the troll explained, and corresponded to a phase of the moon. One by one they drifted beneath foxes, roosters, hares, and doves, each one slightly different in shape, made of pearly moonstone or bright lapis, but all, unmistakably, in the work of the same sublime and reverent hands. By the time the sun had climbed behind the clouds to its mid-morning station, they were just slipping beneath the Gate of Nightingales. On the far side of this span, on whose proud carvings flecks of gold still glimmered, the river began to turn, bearing west one more time toward the unseen eastern flank of the Weldhelm Hills. There were no surface roiling rocks here. The current moved swiftly and evenly. Simon was in the midst of asking Maria a question when Benedict raised his hand. As they rounded a bend, it was before them, a forest of impossibly graceful towers, set like a jeweled puzzle within the larger forest of trees. The Scythe city, flanking the river on either side, seemed to grow out of the very soil. It seemed the forest's own dream, realized in subtle stone, 100 shades of green and white and pale summer sky blue. It was an immense thicket of needle-thin stone, of gossamer walkways like bridges of spiderweb, of filigreed tower tops and minarets reaching up into the high treetops to catch sun on their faces like icy flowers. The world's past lay open before them, breathtaking and heartrending. It was the most beautiful thing Simon had ever seen. But as they floated into the city, the river winding around the slender columns, it became apparent that the forest was reclaiming Dai Chiquiza. The tiled towers, intricate with cracks, were netted in ivy and the twining branches of trees. In many places where once there had been walls and doors of wood or some other perishable substance, the stone outlines now stood precariously unsupported, like the bleached skeletons of incredible sea creatures. Everywhere the vegetation was thrusting in, clinging to the delicate walls, smothering the whisper-thin spires and uncaring leaves. In a way, Simon decided, it only made it more beautiful, as though the forest, restless and unfulfilled, had grown a city from out of itself. Benedict's quiet voice broke the silence, solemn as the moment. The echoes quickly vanished in the choking greenery. Tree of the Singing Wind, they named it, Dai Chiquiza. Once, can you imagine, it was full of music and life. All the windows burned with lamps, and there were bright boats at sail upon the river. The troll tilted his head back to stare as they passed beneath the last stone bridge, narrow as a feather quill, clothed in images of graceful, antlered deer. "Tree of the singing wind," he repeated, distant as a man lost in memory. Simon wordlessly steered their little craft over to a bank of stone steps that ended in a platform, nearly flush with the surface of the wide river. They climbed out, tying the boat to a root that had pushed through the cracked white stone. When they had mounted up, they stopped, staring silently at the vine-draped walls and mossy corridors. The very air of the ruined city was charged with quiet resonance, like a tuned but unplucked string. Even Kantaka stood, seemingly abashed, tail held low as she sniffed the air. Then her ears straightened and she whined. The hiss was almost imperceptible. A line of shadow leaped past Simon's face and struck one of the attenuated walkways with a sharp crack. Sparkling chips of green stone exploded in all directions. Simon whirled to look back. Standing not 100 ells away, separated from the companions only by the rolling expanse of river, stood a black-garbed figure holding a bow as long as he was tall. A dozen or so others, garbed in blue and black surcoats, were scrambling up a pathway to stand beside him. One of them carried a torch. The black figure lifted a hand to his mouth, showing for an instant a flash of pale beard. "You have nowhere to go." Ingen Jaeger's voice came faint above the sounds of the river. "Surrender in the king's name." "The boat!" Benedict cried, but even as they moved to the steps, black-clad Ingen reached out some slender thing toward the torchbearer. Fire blossomed at one end. A moment later he had knocked it on his bowstring. As the companions reached the bottom step, a bolt of fire leaped across the river, exploding into the side of the boat. The quivering arrow ignited the bark almost instantly, and the troll had time only to pull one of the packs from the craft before the flames forced him back. Momentarily hidden behind the leaping fire, Simon and Maria darted up the stairs, Benedict close behind. At the top, Kantaka was running from side to side, uttering hoarse noises of dismay. "Run, now!" Benedict snapped. On the far side of the river, two more bowmen stepped up to Ingen's side. As Simon strained toward the cover of the nearest tower, he heard the awful hum of another arrow and saw it skid across the tiles 20 cubits before him. Two more clattered against the tower wall that seemed so achingly far ahead. He heard a cry of pain and Maria's terrified call, "Simon!" He whirled to see Benedict tumble to the ground, a tiny bundle at the girl's feet. Somewhere, a wolf was howling. And that's where we're going to wrap it up for tonight. So, with that, I say thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for staying a few minutes past the top of the hour. Be good to yourselves. Be good to your loved ones. Be good to your friends and neighbors. We will all be good to each other. That's my plan anyway. I don't really have much of a plan beyond that, but as plans go, it's not a bad one. You all take care of yourself. I'll be back next week. If not, for some reason, if some weird thing happens, I'll let you know on my social media. But otherwise, I'm planning to be back my regular times. Maybe I'll be right, and next week will be daylight savings, and I'll get it right for once. But whatever. Anyway, it won't affect what time the show starts, no matter what. So it'd still be the same time, basically, at least the first version. So with that, I say thank you so much for joining me. Have a good rest of your evening, wherever in the world you are. Have a great week, and I will see you really soon. So thank you. Thank you for joining me. Peace. Good night.